As we approach the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday this weekend, we sadly reflect on the tragic events in Tucson and King's own death by gun violence. Former San Francisco Mayor and Speaker of the State Assembly, Willie Brown, joined me earlier with his thoughts. Welcome, Mr. Brown. We're hearing that the recent threats made to Senator Leland Yee are somehow tied into the investigation of the Gifford incident in Tucson, Arizona. In your career, how much has this whole problem of safety weighed on your mind?
Never really, not heavy anyway, other than when Moscone and Milk were killed. There's been so many other times when people have issued threats. There have been people who, at least one person who was stopped in entering City Hall with the .357 Magnum, but none of that has ever disturbed me.
You don't find that it wears on you, though, just being in the public eye and being controversial? Is that just the life politicians have to accept?
That's the stage in which we have chosen to perform on, so to speak. And you have to take the good with the bad. Believe me, 99% of the time, there's really no reason to be concerned. And your security is such that 1% of the time you could be handled. After all, if you recall, I was pied fairly severely right in front of City Hall with guards all around. So there is absolutely no way, Belva, to ensure your safety. Absolutely.
What is that saying about our society today, though, that we accept that death threats and living on the edge, worrying about your life is just a part of trying to serve your constituency?
I don't think you can worry about that. And I don't think politicians consider it living on the edge. There are too many of us that love public service or to allow that to deter us or cause us not to want to do it. And so I don't think it's an occasion when anybody would shy away from the opportunity because there may be some nut out there that might take a whack at you.
Well, you talked about the murder of Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk coming so unexpectedly, and with your life also being on the list of those threatened. We then heard that there would be a new mood in government. Did you see any change then, and do you expect any now?
No, I didn't see any real change then. Obviously, nobody else replicated or even attempted to replicate what Dan White did, and we went on doing things that we normally do. 30, 40 years later, a congresswoman in the state of Arizona gets hit. And there have been obviously other occasions when things have occurred. No, I don't think that there's ever any way to ensure for certain the absolute safety of anybody. After all, Ronald Reagan, as president, there was an assassination attempt on his life. Gerald Ford, as president, right here in San Francisco, had an attempt on his life. We don't ordinarily change how we do it and what we do because one person or two people in this system somehow decides that they can change the course of history by just one random violent act.
What about the mood of this country, though? Do you think that it is sharper edge than it was, even in the years of those attempted assassinations than it was back then? Do you think that the country has drifted even
I think
closer?
Because of the marvelous creation and the wonderful world of technology, we now know more about what people say and what they do under this freedom of speech. We see more often than not the kind of blogging that goes on and the kind of columnists that there are out there, talk show hosts, all of these people, they didn't exist 35 or 40 years ago. We now, by virtue of this technology, we really are acquainted with what they say and what they do, and it's highly publicized. Obviously, that attitude was there long before these new inventions and methods of communicating. I don't think, Belva, there's been any great change in what has occurred in our conduct and our comments with reference to each other. I just think we've become more conscious of it because of technology.
there are those calling for, say, the month of January to be called Civility Month, so that we would speak kinder to one another, so that America would sharpen some of the language that you're referring to. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's kind of counterproductive to suggest that it should be only 1 month out of the year. Why don't we make a New Year's resolution to go forward every month out of the year, every day out of the year, to be a bit more decent and respectful of each other, even where we disagree, as we did in the legislature with regularity, as we did when Pete Wilson was governor and we Democrats dominated, or when George Deukmejian was governor and we Democrats dominated, or when Ronald Reagan was governor and we Democrats dominated. Yes, we ought to be mutually respectful of each other, but it shouldn't be limited to just 1 month.
Mm-hmm. We are right celebrating the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. Do you think there is any residue left from his wish for a dream for equality and for kinder treatment one to the other? Do you see any effect of that in today's world?
Belva, every time I see any politician running for public office and they invariably invoke the name of King, it means that at least they've read I Have a Dream, or at least they have a little bit of familiarity with Dr. King. And that speaks volumes of an improvement in their communication skills and in their understanding of what ought to be the way in which they conduct themselves.
I want to thank you very much, Willie Brown, for joining us here.
Thank you for the opportunity.